clearing out inventory for the spring, and everything must go. Go to danpatrick.com. While you're there, sign up for the newsletter. It comes out every day, 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific. Wraps up the show. Also gives you a heads up on guests we're going to have and deals that are available at danpatrick.com. Gerry Dulac has been covering the Steelers for a long time. By the way, Bill Cowher will join us on the program tomorrow. Gerry Dulac covers the Steelers for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and the Steelers radio network. If I asked you a month ago, what are the Steelers doing at quarterback, you would have said what?
I would have said not Aaron Rodgers for sure, Dan. It was the last thing I thought they would do. I thought it would be between, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, with a split internally in the organization as to as to which person wants which quarterback. And so knowing that the offensive coordinator did not get along with Russell Wilson at the end, they butted heads over how the offense should be run. And knowing that he was a big fan of Justin Fields, I thought they would lean toward that. But then the offensive coordinator doesn't trump the head coach, the GM, and the owner. But there was a split there, so that's the way I thought it would unfold. And given the age difference and the potential with what they saw from Justin Fields, I would have guessed Justin Fields. I would not have guessed waiting for Aaron Rodgers.
The Steelers don't feel Steeler-like right now. That you bring in DK Metcalf, you don't have a quarterback. You're waiting for a quarterback that might not show up. And if he shows up, who knows what you're getting. But is there a change of philosophy? Like, it's not just, hey, we went 9-8 and we had a winning season and we lose in the first round. Like, eventually, you got to aspire to a little more than that, I would think.
Yeah, Dan, they've made the playoffs for the last 5 years, so it's not like the sky is falling and they're a moribund franchise, but 10-7 each of the last 2 years. But more significantly, first-round playoff exits. That's 8 years now without a playoff win. Mike Tomlin has now had 8 one-and-dones. Marty Schottenheimer is the only guy with more, with 9. So, they aspire to more. The move for Aaron Rodgers, without question, Dan, is very un-Steeler-like. That's why I said just a bit earlier that was the last thing I thought they would do, would be get involved with that guy with a lot of the, let's face it, strange behavior that he exhibits. But that's where they are, and where, what they are interested in right now is the same thing they were interested in last year. That is the immediacy of trying to win a playoff game and getting back on track. It's almost one step at a time. That's the next objective, but they haven't even reached that. I will tell you this, whether Aaron Rodgers or if they feel compelled that they need to bring in a veteran through a trade, nobody's getting more than a one-year deal. They are fully aware that it's time to move on and try to find that franchise quarterback.
Can you see them doing anything in the draft quarterback-wise?
Well, Dan, they gave up that number 2 pick in the DK Metcalf trade. So it's either number 1, and I don't see him going into the first round this year. But certainly they know they have to do it by next year. Maybe the 3rd round, take a chance on a guy. If there's someone they like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's Jackson Dart or Will Howard, but I do know they have interest in those guys, and don't know if they'll be there in the 3rd round. Maybe they have to move into the 2nd round to do so. But I know that is certainly, if it's not urgency this year, it certainly is by next year.
Would the Steeler fan base embrace Aaron Rodgers?
The feedback / blowback that I've received, Dan, during this whole period is, I don't think anybody is thrilled to see. Oh, some people are, but the majority are not in favor of the move. Somewhat for what you referenced earlier about it not seeming like the Steeler way. The guy's 42 years old. He won 5 games last year with the Jets, and he had Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Alan Lazard. He had much better receivers than the Steelers had, and that's what you're looking at here. So it's not like it offers a lot of promise. Dan, I'll say this: Aaron Rodgers is the greatest thrower of the football that I have ever seen. But he's 42, and, let's face it, I think he's putting out on the 18th green if he isn't already finished with his round, professionally speaking.
He's Gerry Dulac. He covers the Steelers for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Steelers Radio Network. Handicap the rest of the division here. Let me start with the Bengals with what they did last night by tying up those two receivers, and maybe they have enough money to sign Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, that's going to be a big key because now you're going to, let's face it, you sign those two, you're going to weaken the rest of your team. I don't blame them for what they did, but that is a lot of money tied up in a quarterback and two wide receivers, probably at the sake of the rest of your team. Trey Hendrickson was the one guy on that defense that gave them a bit of a spark. But if you can't sign him, and if they do, now you're really hamstrung with how much money you have left. So are those four guys enough to challenge the Ravens? Well, I'm a big Joe Burrow fan, and there's two wide receivers. The one in particular is elite. So, I would, because of the issues right now, I'd put them ahead of the Steelers. I never would rank the Browns ahead of the Steelers because, along with the Jets, to me, they're the two most dysfunctional franchises in the NFL. And, the Ravens are still the Ravens. So, if you want me to handicap it, I'd say Baltimore 1, Cincinnati 2, Steelers 3, Browns 4.
It's always nice to have the Browns still in the division there, Gerry.
Yes, it is. It means you don't have to finish in the basement.
Yeah. But I wonder what they're going to do. Can they get squirrely and take a quarterback, at 2?
Well, they would have to trade into the round to get it, Dan, because that second round pick is gone. I will tell you this. I have not gotten any sense of panic in the organization. They feel, if need be, based on what they saw the last 3 games of the 2023 season from Mason Rudolph, that if he has to be your starter, then they will go along with that. All that being said, Dan, this is a team that always has 2 quarterbacks at the ready, 2 veterans. And so even if they don't sign Aaron Rodgers, they have to bring in some type of quarterback with starting experience, veteran starting experience. Skylar Thompson isn't that guy. And so either way, even if it is going to be Mason Rudolph, and even if they draft a quarterback, they still want to have a veteran either as the second quarterback or the third quarterback.
Do you think Russell Wilson is still a starter in this league?
Let me say this. He is still an option for the Steelers, but not a solid one, Dan, because he's down the totem pole. Because if he was any type of option that they seriously considered, I think they would have made that move by now. I think Russell Wilson gets a bad rap. I look at what he did for those first 7 games that he started. This offense averaged nearly 29 points a game, and it finally looked like a unit that was capable of bailing out the defense, which is exactly what he did in that game in Cincinnati when he put up 44 points. The Bengals scored 38, and he threw for 414 and actually outdueled Joe Burrow. It was from that point on, strangely enough, where I think the headbutting began with the coordinator, and we know what happened. I'm not saying that's the reason, but they lost their last 5 games. So I think Russell Wilson can be an effective starter, but he's certainly not a guy who I think in the short term, but I don't think you're going to bring him in and think he's going to be your quarterback for the next 2 or 3 years.
Can Mike Tomlin survive another 10-7 first round exit? Or, sometimes both sides say, maybe, we've gone as far as we could go. I don't know. The Steelers don't fire coaches, but can he survive that scenario?
I think he could survive another 10-7. I think he could survive 9-8. They gave him a 3-year extension. He's good through 2027. And I've always gotten a sense, Dan, that it's up to Mike Tomlin if and when he feels maybe I've had enough. None of this debate is about whether Mike Tomlin is a good coach. We know that. It's about how much longer are you going to continue to watch the same thing before you think, hey, you know what, maybe we just need a change. And it's no reflection on whether Mike Tomlin is a good coach or not.
Great to talk to you as always. Thank you, Gerry.
Yeah, Dan, you got it. Good being with you, man.
That's Gerry Dulac. Been with the Steelers a long, long time. Bill Cowher will join us on the program tomorrow. Yeah, it's un-Steeler-like that you don't know who your quarterback is, and you're waiting for Aaron Rodgers. How much does that solve?